Game design and game development is quite a tedious, but not impossible task. Obviously, otherwise there won't be so many indie games, but it is still quite a hard thing to get into. So how do you do it? Well, with my 8 years experience, I'm going to show you. Welcome to my guide to game design / development. That's the name of the title. The structure of this video is as follows. What? The all-important planning stage, and then we're just going to go through each discipline: programming, art, and audio. And inside audio, VO. And then a little something for marketing on the end. So, where do we begin? If you want to make games, probably it's going to be on your own, then you're going to be classified as an indie developer. What is an indie developer? No one really has defined it. The structure of the different types of game companies and game developers goes as follows. You have indie, which is what you're probably going to be. They tend to be around one person to tens of people, maybe hundreds of people. This is where it starts to get a bit complicated. There's single A and double A. We'll come to those later. And then there's the one you've probably heard of as well as indie devs, and that's AAA. Now, AAA are your actual big companies. They're your Microsoft, your Sony's, your Nintendo's, your Rockstar games. Those are your AAAs. They make the big MMORPGs or open world, third-person, first-person shooter. It's those. Now, indies can make those types of games, but it's a lot more difficult for them and a lot more time-consuming. As well, the size of Nintendo versus you is... I don't need to explain that, do I? What is single A and double A? Well, no one knows. See, people throw those terms around and basically no one knows. It's kind of just a way to sort of grasp an in-between between indie and AAA. But no one really uses those terms. For instance, the people behind Hades, they're classified as an indie studio, but they also could be classified as single A. Or maybe double A? No one knows. So just don't worry about it. You're an indie developer. Unless you join a company, then you might also still be an indie developer or AAA or one of the middle. Now, there is a fifth secret type, and that is quadruple A. Yes, these AAA game companies are starting to claim that they're making games in the quadruple A bracket, which, that is not true. It's not true, not really. Essentially, the past decade almost, these AAA game companies have not really been making that polished or clean games. They always tend to release them with bugs and issues. And so if they want to start claiming that their next games in the making are going to be quadruple A, then they at least need to fix those issues before we let them call themselves quadruple A. Okay, Toby. We get it. We get it. We already knew this, you're saying to me. We understand. How do we make games? That's the question you're asking me right now, isn't it? Get your hands away from the comments. Keep watching this video. Okay. I'll tell you how to make games now. Step 1 is... planning is a very underrated and not well described stage of game development, especially for indie devs. It is basically essential, otherwise you're just going to forget about the project like halfway through, not even halfway through, a day through, and just move on to something else. Like, planning is really important, and at a bare minimum, you need to be making something called a game design document. A game design document is your basic document for everything that you're going to put in the game. It has absolutely everything. It covers all the technical stuff, all the programming and the art, the environment, and possibly your game development timeline. Here's a list of all the things that should be in a game design document. You can use this list to create your own. I'm just going to go through each one now and tell you what they basically are. The summary is essentially your elevator pitch. It's a one-sentence description of what your game is. This should be gripping, and it should explain everything that's going to happen. Your inspiration is an interesting one. AAA studios don't really ever tend to do this, or don't ever really tend to put it in the document, but I think as an indie developer, it's quite valuable because it can at least remind you or get other people on your team, if you have a team, to sort of be on the same page of the type of feel of game you want. Essentially, you're just writing a small paragraph about possible inspirations, whether that's another game you've taken inspiration from, or a film or TV show, or a board game, or just anything. Anything can be your inspiration. Platform is just the platform it's going to be on, so PC or console, you can go into a bit more, saying Xbox, Nintendo, PlayStation, Steam even. The software section is self-explanatory. It's the software you're going to use to make the game. This includes your game engine, which you're probably going to use, any art programs, any 3D modeling programs, any programming applications, anything. Your genre. This should just be a line of all the genres you're covering. Don't go super specific, just stay top level, so first-person shooter, platformer, those types of things. Your target audience, and this is where we get into the business side of things. Remember, our target audience should not just be gamers. You need to actually have a target audience. So 20-year-olds or 30-year-olds, or people who like history, or people who like sport, marketing. We're going to cover this at the end, but essentially this is your marketing plan, or the platforms you're going to market with, how you're going to do it. This section shouldn't be too long, but you know, it needs to give you a general gist and a general plan of how you're going to do it. Budget is a fun one. You're going to have to budget this, or at least you should, because as an indie dev, you are probably going to be out of pocket quite quickly. Out of business and into the creative side, this is your story if your game has one. Most games even do nowadays. This is where your characters and setting goes, as well as a step-by-step of the story. It shouldn't be, you know, too intense. It shouldn't be laying out every single cutscene. It should be just giving you the general gist of the journey that the player's going to go on. Gameplay. This section is going to be the big old meat and potatoes of the game design document. This is going to include your game loop and all your mechanics. So all your programming and all your technical stuff is going to essentially be here. Level design. You could include it into gameplay, but I like to separate them out because it can get a bit more complicated, and separating it makes it easier. Essentially, this isn't the art side of the level design. This is the actual technical side of the level design, so how you're actually going to structure the level art. This is also probably quite self-explanatory. This is any inspirations you've taken with your art, any first basic concepts of your art, and describing the art process of how you're actually going to make and implement it. Audio. Here you describe the type of soundtrack you're probably going to make, or the type of sound effects you're going to make. In audio, I would also throw in a quick line just to say if you're going to be using voiceover or not. UI. Essentially user interactions or user interface. This is how it's going to look, maybe a general overview of it, the way it's going to change throughout the game, all of that stuff. Controls, you need some controls. This is where you map them out. Honestly, this can just be a couple pictures with lines pointing to the buttons telling you what the buttons do. And finally, the development timeline. Now, this doesn't actually really need to be in the game design document. It can be in another document itself. But it is very important that you have one somewhere. This should be a step-by-step plan with ideally dates of what you're going to do and when. If it's your first time doing this, I'll just plan out how long it'll take you to make one level. You can then go from there and plan out your different stages of game development, whether that's your demo and other things. And that's it. That's everything you need in the game design document. Just make it on Microsoft Word and you're good. And if you've made it this far, not only in the video, but in your game development journey, well done, you've gone through the first tedious hurdle. There are many tedious hurdles in game design, and that was just one of many. There's so many. The tedious hurdles are different for everyone, but essentially this is going to be the first one, especially if you've never done it before, because no one likes documentation until you're doing it. And then it's actually kind of fun. But then once you get to the near end of it, then it becomes tedious again. And it's a big old... But anyway, Now we're on to the actual first stage of development. And technically from here on, you can do these in any order, but I'm going to do them in the order I think is going to be beneficial to you. So first up is programming, my specialty. Now, I'm going to be quite an unpopular person, but honestly, I've seen lots of people share this opinion online, and it's that you don't need to know how to program/code to make games. There's lots of different applications and software to help you in that department to make games. For instance, a very popular game engine called Scratch is a no-code game engine. Essentially what it does is it uses visual programming, which sounds counterintuitive to me saying it doesn't have programming, but essentially what it is, it's little multicolored building blocks that you just stick together and then it does things in the game. And I know what you're thinking. This looks shit. I want to make an open world RPG. I want to make a first person shooter. I want to make Call of Duty. Start small though. Essentially just start small. Do a small little game that you're not even going to publish, just to learn the feel of game development. However, essentially as proof that even Scratch can make great games, if you've heard of Geometry Dash, quite a well-known web game that was made originally in Scratch, it can do some great things. Also, Scratch does have the possibility of making 3D games, although you do have to put in a lot of effort for that. Ideally, it's meant for 2D games. If you're completely new to programming and completely new to game design and do want to get into it, just spend a couple days looking through Scratch and making a couple demos. You can do it. There's lots of videos on YouTube. If you're wondering why I'm talking about game engines in the programming section and not talking about programming languages, it's because, well, your game engine dictates what programming languages you can really use. That is, unless you are just a very smart person and can make their own game engine, or you just don't need a game engine and just make a game anyway, because you don't actually need a game engine to make a game. Essentially what a game engine does is it just gives you a bunch of tools to help make the game. It's like Photoshop. It just gives you a bunch of tools to edit and make photos. But anyway, once you have Scratch, and if you've, already have a bit of experience, but you maybe want a better starting point, maybe Game Maker Studio is for you. Game Maker Studio is also mainly a 2D game engine, but games like Undertale was made in Game Maker Studio. The difference between Game Maker Studio and Scratch, however, is that where Scratch only has visual programming, Game Maker Studio has that plus actual programming. So if you're definitely going to make a 2D game, maybe an RPG, try Game Maker Studio. It's probably a lot more friendly than some of the big dogs, which I'll get to at the end. So if you actually want to make something like an RPG, like Undertale, I'd use Game Maker Studio. It's going to be a lot more nicer than the big three, or also the big two, but it's sort of became the big three now, and that is Godot, Unity, and Unreal. And Godot's quite a unique one, as it's actually open source, which essentially just means no one really owns it, and anyone can just edit the code for the software and make it better. Godot is also completely free and getting more and more popular. However, it does have its own programming language that you will have to learn, GD script, but honestly, it's very simple and there are so many tutorials online about it, so maybe that one should be a good one to start with. And then we get to the big two, Unity and Unreal. These are really for two different purposes. Unity is the popular one, the lot more popular one. It uses C# mainly, and it's quite a friendly engine, really. It does have quite a lot of problems in its back ends, but overall it's actually quite good, and it's the one that I use, and it's the one that I'm using to make my game. More on that later. Unreal Engine, it has C++ as its main programming language, and it also uses Blueprints, which is their way of visual programming. But the main reason people really use Unreal is that it looks stunning. Like, the games you can make don't just look like games, they look like real life graphics and animations. They are genuinely stunning, which is why lots of companies actually use it to try and make movies with it, or they use it for pre-visuals. So really, I would either start with Scratch if you're completely new to programming. From there, go to Game Maker Studio, or you can start at Game Maker Studio if you've already got some sort of software development knowledge. And then once you've actually made a couple fully fledged games, and remember, fully fledged games can just be like little mobile clicker games, then you can go to one of the big three / two. Art. This is not my forte. I'm horrible at art, but I'm gonna still try and break it down for you. First of all, you shouldn't do what I do and constantly bash your head against a wall at forcing yourself to do art even though you can't on stream. However, there are so many games that just have a really cool art style but are very basic art. There are so many games that just have a stickman as the character and they animate it. If you can draw a stickman, just have his arms do that. You can take a photo of it, put it into your computer, and there you go, you've done art. And I know what you're thinking. You're gonna be like, I don't want a stickman. I want my photorealistic graphics with a 3D model. Don't do it. Yet again, start small. Honestly, another way to actually do art for your game is, well, if you have the money, pay an artist. Once you pay them, you're still gonna have to credit them in your game, but there's tons of artists on Twitter and on Tumblr and on DeviantArt and on Fiverr, and online in general. There are so many wanting to get into game design but don't want to do programming but just want to make art for games, that you'll be able to find them and negotiate prices, and there you go. And maybe you don't want them to do the art that's going to be in the game and just the concept art, but that's fine as well. Remember to pay artists and credit them. But if you are going to take a stab at art, there's a few ways you can do it. Like I said before with the stickman analogy, draw an actual stickman in real life, pen on paper or pencil on paper, take a photo of it or scan it into a computer, and then just use that. The next step on that is maybe tracing over it in an art program or just using an art program on its own. But Toby, you're saying, I don't have the Autodesk suite, I don't have Photoshop. You don't need Photoshop. There's a few free alternatives. Photopea, it is just online Photoshop. You don't even have to download anything. Just go hit. It's just free Photoshop. It's brilliant. They have a donation system, but you don't have to pay them anything, but maybe you do to support them. And then there's GIMP, which is actually one you've probably heard of. It's one of the really popular free alternatives to Photoshop, and it is just as good realistically. But if you just don't want to do 2D stuff, or at least 2D stuff on its own, and you also want to do 3D and you are ready for it, then Blender is your friend. Don't worry about Maya or any of the other 3D software. Blender is free, it's open source, and it is really good. Be warned, if you're also not an artist, like me, then there's a steep learning curve. Watch the very classic donut tutorial on YouTube and then essentially just go from there. Honestly, it's a lot easier every time you do it. It's like anything you practice. So if you're not an artistic person like me, just give it a go, follow that tutorial. And remember, the last free piece of software is not a software. It's free/paid for assets. If you're using Unity, look on the Unity Asset Store. If you're using Unreal, look at their asset store. You can use TurboSquid for models. There are so many places where you can get free models and just use them in your game. If you want to make a Ben Foddy type of game, one of those, just use a bunch of free assets and then make a side-scrolling climber. Remember, you do have to make sure they are Creative Commons and you can actually use them for your game and not just for personal purposes, especially if you pay for them as well, because that's not always included. Audio/music. It is important that, at least at a bare minimum, your game does have some sounds. Unless you have no sounds at all in your game, then that would be interesting. But most games do, so what do you do about that? Well, unless you can play an instrument, then this is going to be a lot more difficult. But like the others, take it small and take it one step at a time. If you need free sound effects, you can do two things. Number one is Foley. If you need someone walking, take your phone, it's being used to record, take your phone and go outside and start walking. Record that sound, put it in your game. You have just done some Foley. And you can do other things. So if you want to make two swords clash, then you can hit two pieces of metal together or scrape them and do things like that. That's Foley and that's free. You can just do it on your phone. Your phone will have a good enough microphone for that kind of stuff. It is fine. It is your first game, remember. It is fine. The other one is go to Freesound. Freesound is a website that just has a big old database of sounds. Yet again, make sure they are Creative Commons because you don't have any copyright issues, but you have a bunch of free sounds that you can just take and edit as well. But where do you edit them? Well, Audacity. Just use Audacity. It's fine. It's fine for sound effects. Just use Audacity. But if you want to step up and also start creating some music and start editing the audio a little bit more, you can use Reaper. Reaper, like Audacity, is free. They're both free. However, with Reaper, it does, at a certain point after a free trial is up, ask you to pay them £60, $60. Now, this works more like a donation than an actual requirement because you can still keep using the software after the time, so pay them at your discretion, but the option's there. Reaper is great. Essentially, it just has lots more modding potential and lots more features from the get-go. It is a lot more complex, but if you've used Audacity, you'll basically get 99% of things in Reaper. So you've got a way of getting sounds, you've got a way of editing them and making them to your liking. What about soundtracks? Now, soundtracks are interesting because unless you go with Breath of the Wild and go with something really funky that's just 5 piano keys being bashed on a piano, then you're going to need some sort of musical skill. I say that, but also I'm lying. No, there's plenty of tutorials online of how to make basic tracks and basic backing tracks and basic music and how to put them together. Yet again, with all of these, start small, but remember, use Google, use YouTube. They are there and they are fine to use. I will keep iterating that and I'll explain why at the end. For instance, a great program you can use to make NES, 8-bit sort of soundtracks is Family Studio. There are tutorials of it online, so go have a look and have a stab. Like the art section, you can also just find people online, but that's Twitter or Fiverr, to help make you soundtracks if you can pay for it. Maybe start at one, then go from there. Create a business relationship with the people you work with. Now, before we carry on with the audio section and go into the VO part, which will be coming in a second, I will like to reiterate that I didn't say you should hire someone for the programming section. And that's because as a programmer, I think at least more people should at least consider and at least try learning some sort of programming, even if that is the visual building block programming. That is fine, that is still real programming. However, like art and audio, you can find people online to help you program your game. However, they will probably be a lot more expensive, mainly because software engineers and programmers tend to make a lot more in real jobs as opposed to artists and audio engineers. The VO part. This is going to be split into 2 sections, one for game devs and one for VOs. Basically going to be very quick though. So, for game developers, if you want to find voiceovers, you can essentially find them on all the same places I just described, plus a couple others. There are sites like Casting Call Club, where you can put a project up and say you need this many cast members and you can set prices, and people will audition, send you auditions. And that is a great way for new VOs and new game devs to sort of work together and start making business for themselves. Game devs, do be warned that if you start wanting more and more professional voiceovers, it will get expensive. Now, at a bare minimum, voiceovers can go from around $230 to $300 or pounds per session for how long they are recording for. And then for however long they're recording for, usually it's hours, then per hour, more and more money is going to be added onto that. We are expensive, but we're worth it. Now, there are other places you can look for them. Now, you can look at pay-to-plays, which are just other websites that host VOs for you. Just know at some pay-to-plays like Voice123, Voices.com, Mandy, you're going to start seeing these more dearer prices. It's probably going to be around the £100 to £250 mark. So, be warned. And then if you've got real funding, and honestly, you're more tippy-toeing into single A and AA territories at this point, but if you have real funding behind you, or just a lot of money because you're an investor or something, you can actually go for an agency. They will have a roster of voiceovers for you that they can give you, maybe give you their demos for, or if you give them your auditions you want to give to people, they'll give it to their talents, they'll send you the auditions back, and then you can pick that way. And that is where the proper professional voiceovers are. It is completely up to you and completely what you do with your budget. However, a completely underrated side, which I mentioned already, like I said in the art and audio sections, is places like Twitter. As much as Twitter/X is a cesspool of misery and despair, it's got quite a good creative side. Mainly because creatives really need to promote their stuff on there, and Twitter/X has got them in an absolute vice grip chokehold. It's not great, but they are there, so you might as well utilize the platform. All you have to do is put like #casting_call, and then the description may be a link to a Google Docs, and people will apply. And remember, just because they're on Twitter doesn't mean they're not professionals. Just because they're on Fiverr doesn't mean they're not professionals. Just because they're on Casting Call Club doesn't mean they're not professionals. There are so many absolutely brilliant voiceovers that are on these sites that maybe don't have an agent yet, just because. Now, voiceovers, I've had a couple indie game jobs, haven't been released yet, but that's life of an indie dev. Anyway, I've had a couple, and essentially I've got them two different ways: direct email marketing and social media. Look on Twitter, look at the #castingcall or VOcasting. There are all these accounts you can follow, and that they repost different casting calls that you can apply for. It is absolutely brilliant. I love them personally. Secondly, LinkedIn. Get a bunch of different game developers' emails off of there, email them. That's how I got my first one. And for game devs, get on LinkedIn. Post your stuff on LinkedIn and Twitter. Keep posting your stuff. Oh, we've moved into marketing now. Marketing. Yeah, so if you're an indie dev, no one's gonna vouch for you or shout for you. You have to do all the work yourself. Obviously, like I said, you can maybe pay people to do the art, but when it comes to marketing, oh boy, if you don't tell people about your game, no one's gonna play your game. So you need to make a bunch of social media accounts, make a TikTok, make game design TikToks, make a Twitter, post stuff on Twitter about it, post things on Facebook, post things on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great resource, and I think more and more creatives need to use it. It's a great way to connect with more creatives. Start a community, start a YouTube channel, start a Twitch, stream. If you want to move into budget a bit more, make a Kickstarter, gain donations from your Twitch streams, make an Indiegogo, tell your community about these things, and then they will probably help you fund it. There are so many ways to market as well as get money at the same time. It's amazing. I will put a big old warning though. Don't get laid off or made redundant, / leave your job. Don't leave your job. Have it be just a little part-time thing on the side whilst your main job is actually giving you the financial stability. Because trust me, being unemployed is not fun. Yeah, well, that was basically all the main bits, but now it's on to that final part that I kept putting a pin into, which is the final tips. And the first tip is something I've reiterated a bunch in this video, and that's start small. For the love of everything, start small, keep your day job, start small, make a small thing on scratch, make like mobile games. You know those mobile game ads you get on like Facebook that's like, save the princess from the lava, but also gain the like those, the bar things, make that. That is very, trust me, that's easy. You're just clicking. You're just clicking and watching animations happen. Just do that. To make a puzzle game. Puzzle games are great. Please. Right, second tip. This might be quite a controversial take. Here it goes. YouTube tutorials are fine. They are Okay, if you don't know why I'm saying that, essentially if you Google how to do something in Unity, you'll get a bunch of videos telling you how to do that. But also, you'll probably start stumbling, especially if you're going on YouTube and Google quite a bit. You'll start seeing titles called why you shouldn't use tutorials for game design, for programming, for yada 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 yada. And essentially their main point is you're just going to watch the finished product and copy it and not really learn anything, which is true. But also, shut up. Okay, sorry, I don't mean to be that rude. I agree with them. That's not really how you learn things. However, you are starting out, probably. I assume you're going to be starting out. So it's fine. It's going to give you the general gist of what you need to be doing. It's fine. Sure, don't get me wrong. If you encounter a problem, like try and solve it for yourself first. I will always say that, but it's fine to go on Google and go on YouTube and just copy the code. It's fine. I'm gonna spoil a secret. All programmers, and I am specifically talking about programming tutorials, although there are still stuff like art and 3D modeling tutorials, but specifically for programming, all programmers come in two categories. You're either thinking you're stupid or thinking you're a god. And there's no in between. There's no in between. It is fucking insane. However, what I didn't tell you is that neither of them are true and everyone's an idiot. No one's bad, no one's a god. Everyone's just an idiot who either hates themselves or thinks of themselves too much. No one in the programming world is actually good at programming. There's like 1% that is. That's it. You're fine to look at YouTube tutorials. Please just do it. Tip 3, don't use publishers. If you're indie, you don't really need to use a publisher. Just use all of the marketing stuff I told you about, posting and Kickstarter, creating community streaming videos, things like that. Those will do you fine. If you start making more and more games and you are actually getting quite good and maybe some of your games are starting to get quite popular, maybe consider a publisher. However, the publisher will take a cut, sometimes up to 70% of your revenue. Obviously, that is bad because you made the game and they just sort of marketed it, sort of. You should be taking the majority of the cut, first of all. Secondly, if you are using a publisher, make sure your contract is airtight with them. And thirdly, you don't need a publisher if their help isn't going to help your game make more revenue than it normally would. You don't need a publisher if that's not going to happen. Don't use a publisher as a gamble. And then number 4 is just put your game on Steam. Put it on things like itch.io and Humble Bundle as well, but also just put your game mainly on Steam. Because what Steam allows you to do is make Steam keys. And making Steam keys of your game as a developer is completely free. Steam doesn't charge you. You can request as many Steam keys as you want from Steam and they are all completely free. Put them on things like Humble Bundle, put them on other sites, put them as prizes and giveaways to make people more aware of your game, and you're going to be making lots more money because you can sell the keys, people get the game, and it's all essentially completely free to you. It's brilliant. There we go. That, I think, was the absolute basic information you need to start on your game dev journey. Or if you just sort of want to join the industry from the side as an artist, as an audio engineer, as a VO, you know how to get in there now. Make websites, market yourself, market you, market everything you make, and you'll be good. Now remember, every Tuesday and Thursday, I'm going to be streaming. Apart from this week, I'm doing Tuesday, but the Thursday has to be pushed back to Wednesday because I'm busy on Thursday. However, apart from that, every Tuesday and Thursday, 12 to 4, I'm going to be streaming making my game. And the first one is out tomorrow. Go check it out. Also, you can watch all the VODs back on this YouTube channel. Right, all my relevant links are down below. Follow me on all my social media. Follow me on my game dev journey. Follow me on my voiceover journey. Thank you. Bye-bye.